what can you identify as something that you don't want to do, but you're willing to do because you know it's going to be, it's habit formation, and it's identity based habit formation. And
Yes.
as a result of it, it's going to definitely benefit you, and it is going to feel hard. It's to acknowledge that change is the disruption.
Barbara believes that everyone, CEOs, leaders, and entrepreneurs, can achieve personal and professional success beyond their imaginations. She helps people to expand and embrace a bigger version of themselves by showing them how to get results. She brings a wealth of knowledge, skill, and genuine care to those she coaches. As a seasoned speaker, she can engage audiences on a wide range of topics tailored to their needs.
Welcome back to the show, Barbara.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's a pleasure to be back.
Well, it's so nice to see you again, and we have lots to talk about. And one of the things that is starting to show up with my body of work is business people are starting to bring in a soul aspect to the work that they're doing. Are you finding that with what you're doing?
Absolutely. I've been working with a lot of business people and entrepreneurs for years now, and my main focus is combining body, mind, and spirit.
Yes. And so do you find that they need counseling in this area to go forward? Does it soften the very strong business sort of model?
Yes, because I work with going after goals that they don't know how to do,
Yes.
this is where we aim higher. And as soon as people start aiming higher, then all the logical mind puts up a lot of resistance. So it's really focusing on helping people create from their future self versus from their past or from what they know. Because as soon as you start going after something you don't know how to do, this is when spirit will start guiding you and start bringing to you some awarenesses, opportunities, synchronicities, people, events, and circumstances start to change as you look for the signs, look for the signals, look for the guidance that comes your way. And then people allow themselves to trust more, but it's not without helping them navigate through the waters of the human condition that's holding them stuck in a rut of sameness.
Do you find that most business people do have intuition, that they rely on that sort of extra guidance when they're putting together a deal or getting ready to interview you on a podcast, for instance, or yourself when you are going to be interviewed?
Yes, I'm seeing people more and more trusting their gut. I was just talking with a client today who does solar energy, and he was talking about a client who was very, very difficult. And he had a gut reaction going, she's going to be difficult. But he didn't listen to his gut. He decided that, he would move forward because he needed the income. And it turned out that she was disgruntled the whole way and decided to sue him. And now he's saying, if only I had listened to my gut. So I really feel that, intuition, it's vibration. Everything is vibration. So when we start to understand that it's all energy and that we are vibrational beings and that there is a greater power, there's something that's helping us breathe, right? Where are we getting our breath from? Where are we getting our consciousness from? Where are we getting our thoughts from? How is it that all these signals are coming to us? Well, it's not just willpower. There's really magical forces, as you say in your book, right? Mm-hmm. There are magical forces that are conspiring to align you to a path that will guide you. It's just a matter of listening. And most people are, again, so conditioned by the mechanism of the body, right? The age of Newtonian physics, we're so taught to, the mechanical industry, the chemical industry. But there's an invisible side to success. There's an invisible side that has so much power and so much force. And we're all tapped into the same source. I like to say to people, it's really dependent on the size of your light bulb.
Wonderful. What a great analogy. Yeah, because I find that we do get messages. And I mean, I'm guilty of this too. And I'll have an intuitive hit and I'll question it.
Mhm.
And later, if I don't follow what that intuitive hit was, I then start regretting. And a person would think that if this happened a few times, that you would learn to listen to that inner guidance,
Yes, yes,
right?
exactly. And so, what does it take to listen, right? And sometimes a lot of people, I work with a lot of people, Rhonda, on the concept of change. Why is change so complicated? And as you know, I lost my husband suddenly. And at that time, it was change. It was like there's two ways that we change, and that's through either a traumatic event or a static event, like a wedding or a death or 9/11. And then there's constant spaced repetition of a new idea. And when you get a new idea, whether it be a mentor, somebody who's influenced you, impacted you, what are you listening for? And I know that when I was at my rock bottom, I just kept asking for a sign. What's next? Give me a sign. Am I on the right path? What do I do? Things are changing. Yes, that's complicated, but what's good about it? And the more that I started to shift from victimhood to I'm the designer of my life and I'm in communion here with a greater power. How am I listening effectively? And sometimes it would just be simply asking.
Hmm. I love what you said there. I am the designer of my life.
Hmm.
That is a very empowering statement and what many people really need to hear, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Because because we're searching sometimes. And even when the hits come through, we don't pay attention and we don't realize that this is our life and that we can design our life the way we want. And with coaching, and I mean, you do a lot of coaching, I mean, that would be really a great thing to coach on.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's what I do. I coach on the future self. Most people, again, are living from their past. They're bringing their past to dictate their decisions in their present moment versus because it's a lot easier, right, to connect the dots to the past. But to connect your dots to the future, who is that future self? What does he look like? What is the result? What are the outcomes? I direct people more in, looking toward an end goal versus a means goal. And yes, we need means goals to measure or to see in the tangible world. But ultimately, I ask people, you want this because you can, so that it leads to what? Whether, it's a lifestyle that you want to have, whether it's more friendships, more adventure in your life. It's usually, an end goal that people desire, but they don't know how to structure the way to get there, to connect those dots. And that's what I help people do. And a part of it is listening to inner guidance and tapping into the higher version, which is the higher self, the mind, using the mind versus the brain, because we're so locked into our pathways of conditioned mind. So how do we break up with a conditioned mind? I like to say to people all the time, from friends to family members, please upgrade your opinion of me. I'm no longer that 16-year-old. I'm no longer that 30-year-old. I'm no longer that person who did that when I was 35, and you're still holding on to that concept of me. We change and we evolve, but sometimes we just hold on to this identity, but a lot of the time it's not a true identity, it's a shell identity. It wasn't until I lost my husband, that I discovered I had lived my whole life seeking approval outside of myself. So that's these, seeking validation, seeking, trying to prove to others that I was worthy and that I could do what they wanted me to do. And it wasn't until I started working with my mentors that I started to see the light and know that, I attended a master's program in spiritual psychology. And just even the first month was working on an affirmation about, a personal affirmation, one about who I am. And that radically took me out of my grief. And it took some time, but, the level of grief that I was in, I had lost 5 really close loved ones in a 2-year period. And now I see that it was really the mechanism to break up with my old self.
Ah, to break up with your old self. Now, tell me, Barbara, when you change your approach, what you're doing, and all those things, and people, you run into people that you haven't seen in 2 years, and they're still at the same level. Does that create a little bit of a friction? Sometimes it's your high school friends, right?
Right.
And they don't really know how to sort of connect with you because now you're a different person.
Yes. Yes. But the other side of that, though, Rhonda, is that
Uh-huh.
I have to examine my own assumptions of them not changing.
Ah.
Right? Because sometimes they'll surprise me. I'll talk about what I'm doing and I'll find out that they've done some evolution as well, you know? And that's very exciting. Whereas some of the people who haven't or stayed in their ways, I just look at the potential in them, you know?
Pardon?
And I look at the potential in
You
them.
look at the potential, yeah.
Yes, yes. And so to not make assumptions or judgments, because I know that if I'm in judgment, that, or I feel that they're in judgment, it's really just a reflection of a part of me that's still in judgment of myself.
Okay.
Right. So any kind of resistance, I like to say step into resistance, because on the other side of that, there's magic. You don't know who you are. You never will until you discover the parts of yourself you haven't yet met. So how do you meet those parts if you're still holding on to it because it happened this way in my past? That's the way it's going to happen in the future. And that's the part that most people, myself included, I'm playing a bigger game for myself right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I have an opportunity that's scaring the pants off of me. And I'm just watching all the old part of me, all these old parts being scared, terrified, or reactive, or making excuses, justifications, instead of looking at, I'm calling in what I've asked for. Now she's here. She's been getting ready, and now is an opportunity to say yes to, instead of allowing the paradigm, the old self, the neural pathways that are stuck in the groove of familiarity to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that takes a lot of work, though. I mean, you have to be very in touch with who you are and realize shortcomings and realize strengths in order to be able to evaluate that. I mean, that's the toughest thing. Like a lot of people, and I'm included in this, is I don't realize my growth until I've grown and I'm reflecting back
Yeah.
on what I've went through, and I'm thrilled because the tough part's over.
Right.
Can
Right.
you speak on that? Because it's scary to people. It is.
Yes. I just had a group last night, and one woman who's been with me doing this work for 8 years said, this work is hard.
Yes.
Her kids are thanking her. She's created so much magic in her life and their lives. And, but they're not doing the work. They're looking at her saying, you're working hard. And she says, it's hard work. It's really about conscious, deliberate effort, right? The brain, so our body is a mechanism of the mind. Our brains don't like to work hard because it takes energy. So we would rather have the path to least resistance, which means we go on autopilot. Autopilot is what makes things easier or feel easier, right? But Albert Gray wrote a great article called The Common Denominator of Success. And he says, highly successful people form the habit of doing things that others don't want to do. And so it's taking something that feels hard, doing it repetitively so that the body and the brain gets into a flow state by understanding it's now on autopilot, right? We don't have to, we still may not want to do it. It's like brushing our teeth. I still don't want to brush my teeth, but it's a lot easier when I don't think about it, right? It's just that autopilot. But so autopilot works for us when we're driving a car and a lot of other reasons, right? We don't want to have to think about opening up our front door and the blood running through our veins and our tendons and muscles working and all in collaboration. So we need autopilot. But it's the things that are keeping us stuck that the brain is not wanting to think hard. So one thing, a method that I use that's wonderful that I learned from one of my mentors, and I didn't value this as much as I'm valuing it now, is for every week, like I journal every week and I design and I write, what my week looks like and what my 90 days look like and what my year, what I want in achievement. But it's really important to take some time at the end of a week to reflect back on the week and who were you last week to who are you this week?
Ah,
Rather than this isn't going anywhere, it's not happening. So I like to say, faith it till you make it, right? Use the idea that you're in the action, you're in the desire, you're working with mindset, you're working with the patterns and the habits and the behaviors. I like to work on identity-based behaviors. So having come from the entertainment business, having been an acting coach and director, I like to help people build a new self-image. I like to help people build what's the character that they are evolving into and what are the behaviors, habits that need to change in order to start acquiring a different mindset, a different level of consciousness, and who are they hanging out with, because consciousness is available to us at all times. It's just who are we listening to and how are we adapting it for our higher good, right? And that's where change is complicated, Rhonda. And change, there's a reason for it, right? Our ego mind wants to keep us safe. We want to stay in that cave. And because the brain is always looking for threat, it's protecting us from danger. We're still looking at our cities as the jungle, right? Lions and tigers and bears, because the ego, it's actually the lower brain has not evolved since its evolution, right? And even our midbrain, it evolved after the lower brain. And then the midbrain is the emotional brain. And then our higher brain, the neocortex, evolved millions of years later. But we're still attaching this survival mechanism. And I think we're evolving more in consciousness, the people that understand tapping into higher consciousness have used it to control the masses. I think the masses are starting to learn through podcasters such as yourself, authors such as yourself and myself, and people who are out there speaking and encouraging people to evolve the higher mind, right? I think that more and more people, I'm surprised at networking calls that I'm on and I'm talking to an IT person, and then I find out they've written a book on the Matrix or some, really evolved, consciousness, because they're going into the quantum world. We're now leaving the Newtonian physics, which I think doctors are still stuck on, in our medicine and in the training. I think the quantum physics is about 17 years ahead of the medical industry.
mm-hmm.
I do think that, people are becoming more aware that we're entering the age of quantum physics and energy.
Yes, well, there seems to be a whole shift in human consciousness, and people are more aware. There'll always be people who don't want to evolve in this lifetime or can't evolve in this lifetime, but we're here really to evolve our own lives.
Right. When I was in the master's program in spiritual psychology, we talked a lot about most people are on a goal line, right? It's either you succeed or you fail, or
Yes.
that it's you win or you lose. But it's not about winning or losing. It's really about ascending, right? It's ascending to the higher
Yes.
part of ourself and accepting ourselves and the miracle that we are and the beauty of life, and being in gratitude and appreciation rather than just in assuming that something is, assuming from the victim stance, right, that life is hard or it's not going to work out for me, whatever that is. That's what we've been taught most of our lives, the goal line, right, wrong, win, lose, succeed, fail, right? And there's just success can mean so many things for so many people.
Hmm. You touch on so many aspects there and trying to figure out which way to take this conversation. Consciousness. I find that, and please speak on this, is that the more aware you are, the more aware you become of your surroundings and people and energy and vibration, I think it softens a person more, and being able to meet that person where they are instead of where we are.
Yes.
And I find is the more I meditate, the more I get in touch with the true essence of who I really am, that my
Mhm.
life becomes so much easier.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but but it's a big hurdle to get from. I mean, we see life in hurdles, I think, is this
Mhm.
goal, that goal, and this goal. But if we saw it as helping our body and our brain to be more in touch with the true essence of themselves and then reach out vibrationally to other people, that it would be a more cohesive relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
I
think,
think a lot of that is what you teach in your courses.
hmm, exactly. And it's to also, to be so aware of oneself in frequency and feeling, because a lot of people, myself included, in the past and at times still do, blame outside myself. Oh, somebody made me feel a certain way, or somebody said something that made me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm choosing my feelings no matter what. Nobody makes me feel anything, even
Ah,
if
that's a good
somebody,
point. That's a
right?
good point. Can you repeat that?
Yes.
Nobody is
Nobody
making
makes
you.
me feel anything. And it's just all in perspective that if somebody says something but I deem hurtful, I'm going to allow myself to feel hurt, versus using, you know, discrepancy, or using, a lot of the time I work with a theme or a value. What's a core value that you can live by? I know for myself, even growing up, I had a lot of principles about behavior, how to treat other people, and I lived by those principles. And one of my biggest core values is elegance. So I remind myself, to speak elegantly. I remind myself to show up elegantly. I remind myself to respond elegantly. And so what does that look like? What does that sound like? Who am I being? If I am I being reactive if I'm being elegant? No. It's so I remind myself, take a breath, and choose. And from that place, it's to understand that if I have a feeling, that it has to do with my thinking, it has to do with my consciousness, it has to do with my perspective, it has to do with the story I tell myself, it has to do with the meaning that I give it. It's all of those things related to what might be a trigger from a past event. And it's to have awareness that it really has nothing to do with that next person, but it has everything to do with you. And that's taking responsibility at a very, high level. And taking responsibility 100% of the time for yourself is not easy.
No, and it can be a little bit exhausting as well. I know myself, what I do to encourage myself, and we need to encourage ourselves to accomplish things during the day so that we're not getting up every day and living the same day over and over, right? And so I make lists, and on
Yes.
that list are easy things, and on
Mm-hmm.
that list are mediocre things, kind of difficult, and then there's the more difficult ones. And sometimes those more difficult, those challenges end up going on to the next day, onto the next page, onto the next page, but they made it onto the next page even though they didn't get accomplished that day. And
Yes.
so I think that instead of beating ourselves up from not accomplishing and not progressing is to set ourselves up for success. And this is one of the things that you talk about a lot is
Yes.
set yourself up for success. Be gentle, be kind with yourself, make yourself do things that you don't want to do, because if we don't, we'll just stay the way we are. You make
Mm-hmm.
yourself do the things that you do not want to do, because when you do those and when you see the results of those, it builds your character and
That's
it
it.
builds who you are as a person and your personality.
Exactly.
Have you found that with the clients that you work with, Barbara?
Absolutely,
Yes.
Rhonda. I'm doing a group tonight and we're talking about self-image. And it really is about what can you identify as something that you don't want to do, but you're willing to do because
Yes.
you know it's going to be it's habit formation and it's identity based habit formation. And
Yes.
as a result of it, it's going to definitely benefit you and it is going to feel hard. It's to acknowledge that change is the disruption and that when they're like in the neural pathway, right? And so we have neuroplasticity, thank goodness, right? It's never too late to change, Rhonda. It's never
Mhm.
too late to change, right? Because the brain can change. There's neuroplasticity, but when we're building a new groove, the old one is wanting to just keep repeating, 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 repeating.
Right.
Again, that's the path to least resistance. So when we're aware of how our mind is functioning, then we can see what's happening and go, oh, that's what's taking over right now. Then we get conscious. And in that moment of being conscious, then we can start to choose. I'm doing it anyway. It doesn't feel comfortable. It might feel hard. And this can be related to um, exercise. It can be related to eating. It can be related to picking up the phone to call somebody. All of those things where we feel, remember, like our nervous system is automatically going to be shaken, when we're looking at something that's outside our comfort zone. And it's to start to understand that we're growing our capacity and that in growing our capacity, it's the do it anyway, right? The Nike do it anyway, to step into that resistance and discover what are you going to be facing. I know in the beginning when I started coaching many, many years ago, I would pretend and I'd ask myself the question, and I still do every night. I ask the question, am I set up for success tomorrow?
Oh,
And in the morning, I look around at my office, and I just say, "Am I set up for success today?" And I do my meditation and then I do my morning ritual, and which is and even like the night before, I set myself up with what are my actions for the next day, and but it's also putting in breaks. It's also putting in lunch breaks. It's also putting in, flow states. It's, being in, again, the feeling place. Are we feeling good about doing something? Is the old self in a battle with the desire for the new self? Are we convinced that we feel bad, or are we aware that it's just the mechanics of the brain that's limiting us, right? So these are distinctions. And I even like to say, as far as like feeling, the feeling place, I really I'm wholeheartedly in belief that we create from the feeling place, right? We create from the heart center. And and sometimes our feelings are lies, right? Sometimes our feelings are addictive states. Like, why am I waking up and I'm stirring a cup of coffee and I start singing, "You've got to work hard for your money." And then I start feeling anxious. And it's like, but nothing's happening to me. I still have a roof over my head. It's a sunny day, and yet my body is going into this feeling state of anxiety based on imagined reality.
Yes.
And so the power of imagined reality is that we can use it for us or we can use it against us. It's just a lot easier to use it against us because the brain is looking for threat. So the real exercise, just like any kind of exercising, is mental exercising on creating an imagined reality of what it is you do want, where it is that you are heading, what is it that you can imagine as having, because spirit is continually seeking fuller expression and expansion. It wants growth no matter what. We wake up and we've got a goal. We wake up with a goal to get out of bed. We wake up with a goal to call a friend. We wake up, it's just, we are always seeking more.
Hmm. What you mentioned there was the observer.
Mm-hmm.
And many times we're out of our body. We don't feel our body within us. Is that when we observe ourselves, we have to be in our body in order to observe. And when we include our body instead of just our mind
Mm-hmm.
into equations, that is the tipping point, I think. But a lot of us aren't comfortable when we sit in our body and feel our body. And that's why meditation is so important. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yes, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of people, even when I ask them, what are you feeling?
Yes.
It's the standard, happy, good, great, sad, angry, mad, glad, right? But there's so many emotions, that we do feel, and naming the emotions is an important part of the process of awareness. I like to really encourage people to start with gratitude and to be in their body. So it might be, where I ask them to just look out their window and to see something that is enjoyable to look at and to describe it. And as they just start to describe it and see it, and then they start to get in their bodies more and feel it. And then I ask them to expand. I even ask people to hug the wall of their favorite room in their house. And when you hug that wall, what are some thoughts that come to mind, such as, who built the wall? Right? Where did the wood come from? Where did the cement and stucco come from? Who were the people involved? How did the trees serve us? How did the lumber get to us? How did the salespeople put SKUs on the lumber? How did that get transported? What We have a microcosm, and a lot of the time people are so self-focused
Yeah.
that they're it's once they start thinking in outside of themselves that they can come into thinking and feeling more. I know it's kind of like ironic,
Yeah.
right? But self there's like a difference between self-consciousness and self-awareness, because self-consciousness is where most people live, which is judgment of self more often than not. A lot of the time, even with shyness, it's a form of self-consciousness, just being so aware of oneself in judgment, really, in
Mhm.
not enoughness, in inner critic. It's in, that I am not good enough, right? Versus self-awareness, and then looking outside into the macrocosm and to allow yourself to feel the gratitude. Look at the flowers with the bee and start to allow the expansion into how did that bee even come into existence? What does that bee end up doing? The pollination and the flowers and the gratitude to be able to have all the flowers in your, in your sphere, to be able to smell, to see, to use your five physical senses. And that's the way that I help people, tap into feeling more, feel the five physical senses, or even imagined reality. Like if I'm doing a speech on stage, I imagine the response in the audience, and I use my five physical senses. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I touching? What am I tasting? What am I smelling? To bring it alive into that feeling place. And when we're in that feeling place, that's when we're activating the vibrations, right? That's when we're activating signals. That's when we're putting out, and that's when we draw to us more like-minded signals. Like it's the like attracts like, it's the law of vibration. And it's using feeling to do that.
So let's say someone right now is been wanting to do something with their life. They just want to do something, whether that's changing positions in a job or whatever it is. What are some of the things that they could start to think about in order to encourage themselves to take that first step? Because lots of times, don't you find, Barbara, as we look at the whole picture and we look at our goal and what we want to attain, and you've just spoke beautifully about this, but we need to start at that basic point, right? That first beginning, that first step to achieving what we're going to achieve, let's say in 6 weeks or 6 months.
Yes.
But we're impatient. So our impatience also even keeps us sometimes from taking that first step, because all we can see is what we want and how hard it's going to be to get there, that we fantasize about it, but we don't really do anything about it because we have to motivate ourselves. It's a lot about making yourself do it as well.
Absolutely. And it's a big part of the challenge, right? So that's
Yes.
why um, I encourage people to invest in mentoring or invest in coaching or get in a mastermind group or get around like-minded people who allow you to dream big and, and inspire you when the going gets tough and support you. But I often found as well, Rhonda, that unless people put skin in the game, I get really great results from my clients when they pay for the higher ticket program than the $500 program,
Yes.
right? There's just something of value that they put to the higher ticket that they don't put to the lower ticket. I equate it to like buying a $10 pair of sunglasses versus your $400 pair of sunglasses. I lose a lot of $10 sunglasses. I don't lose my $400 sunglasses, and they're
Okay.
in cases and they're protected, and they're cleaned with the right cloth, and there's just a different value appreciation. Ultimately, it comes back to self-worth and self-value and self-image, and that's controlling everything. So you can't, and I would say to actors all the time, if you think you can direct yourself, good luck. And when you're the picture in the frame, it's very hard to see yourself, and the blind spots are always the spots that are going to keep you the same and stop you from growing, and they're going to give you the excuses. So one of my favorite mentors, Bob Proctor, who has since passed, would always say 97% of the time we are off track, right? It's part of our psychocybernetic system. So spirit will always pick up where you left off. It's just a matter of just get back on track. But most people will take the time to beat themselves up for being off track instead of just getting back on track, letting go of the past and keep moving forward. So it's a matter of designing it in such a way that you set yourself up for success. And one of the first steps that I do with most of my clients, all of my clients, is to allow yourself to fantasize. Most people after working with me for many, many years, one of the biggest thank yous that I get is thank you for showing me how to dream bigger. Thanking you for allowing me to have a vision bigger than I had. And so when we allow ourselves to fantasize and we get very relaxed and make a list of personal wants and make a list of professional wants and don't let money, time, family, none of that get in the way or interfere. Just let the dream show itself, right? Because most people tiptoe their way safely to death with their dream buried inside. And that's the safety net, right? Just doing
Hmm.
tiptoeing safely, and then there's more dreams in the graveyard than there are actually coming to life. So once you let yourself fantasize, and it might be, I know, like when I first started doing this work, even for myself, a personal want for me was to be able to pick up a tab at a five-star restaurant for anybody sitting at my table. I just had this burning desire because I love eating at fine dining restaurants, right? So that was, I started talking about it. I started aiming for that. I started to practice, taking small groups to the Hilton. It didn't have to be at a five-star, but it was like letting myself know, letting my subconscious know that I wasn't going to die by picking up a tab for somebody else, right? Really breaking up with that old self and the old patterning. And then from that place, it leads you to start thinking differently and start asking different questions. It's really all about, you know, when you're aiming for something you don't know how to do. And when I was working with Benjamin Hardy, one of my mentors, and it's all about the impossible goal. When you aim so high, there's no room for imposter syndrome. It's just, it's really about finding the pathway. And then what happens is all the lesser goals, all the distractions start to fall away because you start to see that they are not really the pathway to, activating that higher part of you that has so much potential. And to really start raising, Benjamin calls it raising your floor. And as you start raising your floor, your standards start changing, your thinking starts changing. You start, seeing opportunity in different ways, rather than saying, I'm not worthy of that. It's recognizing that it's here to explore, right? And to step in. And it's not without the old self still continuing to battle the change.
Hmm.
It's just to be able to see that there are parts that you will never know are there until you really step into, the bigger dream. Or to, like, I was a very talented dancer as a young person, but never did anything with it. But now I'm taking flamenco classes and aiming for being, in my 80s as a professional flamenco dancer. Why not? And if anything, what it's doing for me is exercise and building my bones and bringing alive a spirit inside of me and helping my health. And at the same time, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to do a little dance on stage when I'm speaking. So it's part of that dream, and then we start connecting more dots to the potentiality that's out there for us.
Yes, so well said. I know that when I was in a coaching course with you, Barbara, and you wanted us to set an intention of what we wanted to accomplish. And I set my intention. And about three-quarters of the way through your course, I started to get really excited about something else. And I remember announcing it that I had changed what I had originally thought, and I had changed it to something quite big.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's and I want you to talk about your coaching and how people may connect with you so that they can join your coaching. But sometimes we think we know what we want until, week after week, we're conditioned by you to raise our expectations of ourselves, and you don't say it that way. You take us on a beautiful journey so that all of a sudden this creativity starts coming out in the class. And then the more the class goes forward, the more weeks that go by, and the engagement with the other people in the class also helps people to say, oh, darn it, they are doing something absolutely fabulous. And it inspires everybody else to take another baby step or another giant step, whatever it might be. It's just fabulous. Can you tell the audience about your coaching course?
Well, thank you, Rhonda. Yes, it's a 3 month course, and I have a couple of different courses. One is Create Your Future Self Now, and my other course is Thinking into Results, which is the course that I certified with Bob Proctor. And essentially, it's like there was an HR. Was she a man? Yeah, she was a manager that came into the program, and her goal was to become an HR director, right? So she was working with like 8 people under her, but she wanted to be able to have 200 people under her. And she was doing really well and she started seeing that she wasn't happy in her job because she was really blaming everybody else and not seeing that she was responsible for much of the results, for many of the results. And halfway through the program, she said, Barbara, I don't want to be an HR director. I said, what do you want? She said, I want a vineyard in Tuscany. And we were 7 weeks into the program, and it's a 12-week program. And I said, so just now's the time to plant that seed. And I tell you, Rhonda, talking about spirit, within 1 week, somebody came to her and said, I just found a hotel for sale in Tuscany that has 15 rooms for $350,000. And it has a vineyard. And then a friend of hers came to her and said, I have a private jet. I'll fly you to Tuscany. Let's go. And then, but she got cold feet. She didn't want to leave her job, her pension. She was, helping out, supporting her husband, all of that. So what we did though was we turned her passion for wine into a sangria business where she now caters, for companies here in Los Angeles with her sangria product while she still got her job, but she's expanding, plus she's writing a book. So there's other ways that we can use that bigger dream, and we can still be in the aspects of it until the sign is right and the time is right. And sometimes it doesn't have to be right. Sometimes
Yeah.
we have to make the decision, leap, and find out, that this is exactly where we need to be. So
Mm-hmm.
I help people navigate through, deciding on how to play a bigger game. I worked with a 70-year-old woman who wanted to lose weight, but after talking with her about her interests, she admired Ernestine Shepherd, who was a bodybuilder in her 80s. So I challenged this woman to join a bodybuilding competition, and she did. And she, of course, was at the gym 5 o'clock in the morning. She could hold a plank longer than anybody in the gym. She lost the weight, right? But here's the irony. She ended up not competing at the competition, even though she had her pink fuchsia bikini and her tanning spray all set to go. She was sick the week of the competition, but she achieved the goal of losing the weight that she had been trying to lose for over 10 years.
Wow.
Right? So again, it's the surprises that come along the way. Or somebody who wanted to write a book, I challenged them to invite 20 people in 3 months' time to listen to the first draft of their book. And I said, it's not a decided, committed decision until you send out the invitations. So within 3 days, she sent out invitations. 3 months later, I was in her living room while she was reading the first draft of her book because she became a writer. She sat down at her desk every day, and she had been writing for years, but she just had some structure and she had a commitment that she wanted to live up to. Commitment. A decision's not a decision until you're in action, and it must be a highly committed decision.
Wonderful. And how may people reach you, Barbara?
They can go to my website, and that's at www.barbaradaoust.com. And they can sign up for a bonus consultation with me where I can see whether or not we're a good fit. And I have groups that I will be starting. I've got a series of groups going right now, and then I'll be starting my new series in the fall, mid-September, where I'm looking for people who want to commit, to that higher version of themselves and
Yes.
be on a journey that it can be scary, but very exciting. Sometimes I say it's a Cadillac ride. You can put in on the seatbelt, but at the same time, we're going to go places.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me, Barbara. It's always a pleasure to be in your company. The breadth of your knowledge is incredible, and what you can speak on is so inspirational. So thank you very much, my friend, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and being part of the journey with Nature of Consciousness, your host, Rhonda Grant. Theme song is composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.